Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I will review today is The Key. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of The Key with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself, if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. The Key, or Kagi, is a novel written by Japanese writer Junichiro Tanizaki and published in 1956. Tanizaki is considered by many in Japan the greatest modern writer, and he is one of my personal favorites. His writings deal mostly with obsessive sexuality, probably reflecting his own inadequacies and curiosities, and they also question Japanese cultural modernization, which was a very important and controversial subject during his life. When writing, Tanizaki was rather liberal in his subjects and willing to shock in his descriptions. He was a bit of a contradiction, very Japanese in his lifestyle compared to other modern Japanese writers, but less politically ideological and not willing to see suicide as some kind of heroic end. He was one of the pioneers in early Japanese cinema, but it is his novels and short stories that have enjoyed wide popularity, and many have been adapted into films. What is The Key about? The book is about a matrimonial midlife crisis brought by the suppressed needs and feelings and the ensuing, somewhat desperate effort to rectify it. Even now, after more than 20 years of marriage, with a daughter herself old enough to marry, she refuses to do more than perform the act in silence, never to whisper a few soft, loving words as we lie in each other's arms. Is that a real marriage? I am writing out of frustration at never having a chance to talk to her about our sexual problems. The broad subject is the intimate relationship between two people with the usual power struggle and raw emotions at play, such as fear, jealousy, deception, and regrets, and further the resulting manipulation and psychological games, and also the effects the crisis have on other people, in this case the daughter and to a lesser extent her boyfriend. A bit of the plot. First, let's introduce the main characters. There are 4 individuals involved: the unnamed protagonist and husband who is in his mid-50s, his 10 years younger wife Ikuko, and 20-something daughter Toshiko, and her boyfriend Mr. Kimura. The base of the plot are journal entries by husband and wife over a period of a few months. The story takes place in Kyoto, where on New Year's Day, the husband, who is a university professor, decides to begin a new diary focusing on the not talk about sexual problems between himself and his wife. He hides the key to the diary, but in a manner that his wife should be able to find it, with the hope that she reads it and becomes aware of his sexual curiosities and fantasies. Why should he have dropped the key in a place like that? Has he changed his mind and decided he wants me to read it? Perhaps he realized I do refuse it if he asked me to, so he's telling me, "You can read it in private, here is the key." The wife starts her own diary where she discloses some intimate information about herself and marks it to see if the husband had opened it. The daughter becomes an unintentional witness to what she considers her parents' perverse games, and she is somewhat of a collateral damage to their erotic activities. Later, her boyfriend is drawn into playing to form a love triangle with the daughter and the mother, and as time passes, the game becomes more complex and involving, and the participants go further and further, and eventually they end up in a place of no return and need to come to terms with the consequences of their actions. Above all, the wife. And that's the basic plot. What are my thoughts about The Key? I personally like the theme of the book and the way the plot is presented as diary entries, but I think to enjoy and connect with the story, you will need a certain level of maturity and some intimate experience with other people. And further, you will need to pay close attention to the plot, since it constantly and somewhat vaguely alternates between husbands and wives' entries. I think the story might have been partially inspired by Tanizaki's own life, since his wife had an affair with another man, which he seemingly encouraged. The husband's and wife's diary entries show each one's frustrations, which seem to be reaching their peak and need to be rectified, and each one makes an effort to amend them the best they can. At the time, my only regret was that he didn't fully satisfy me. Instead of accusing him of weakness, though, I felt ashamed of my own lustful appetite. I was sorry about his declining vigor, and, far from blaming him, tried to be all the more devoted. But since January, I have had to look at him in a new light. The journals initially were begun as a tool of communication, since each one assumes the other is reading it, but over time they became a tool of manipulation. The reason for the husband to start the journal was that his wife is not willing to discuss their sexual problems, and he feels or hopes that through writing he will be able to clarify and then rectify them. Basically, he can't keep up with his wife sexually and is afraid she might find another chap to fill in. And she does. So the whole original purpose and effort of keeping the journal might seem futile. But in actuality, the journal takes on a new function and starts to serve as a guide to the husband's own fantasies and fetishes, with the hope that the wife will read it and oblige. He continues to imply that all the effort is for his wife's satisfaction, but in reality it is more for his own pleasure. Through his actions, he comes across as a bit of an emotional masochist, but maybe he feels the play is a necessary risk to amend the relation with his wife, and as the acting progresses, his level of enjoyment increases. At that moment, I felt I had burst into another world, soared up to some towering height, to the very zenith of ecstasy. This was reality. The past was only illusion. We were alone together, embracing. Perhaps it would kill me, but the moment would last forever. The game continues because both of them are willing participants, and out of playing it, each one gets something they want. The wife starts her own journal to vent her frustrations and disappointments, and later she uses it to justify her own matrimonial transgressions. She blames the shortcomings of their marriage on the pressure from her parents and says they should have married different people with whom they were more sexually compatible. She admits she finds her husband repulsive during sex, but at the same time, perhaps to rationalize the years they spent together or to maintain an image of a good wife, she says she loves him and couldn't give herself to another man. I violently dislike my husband, and just as violently love him. No matter how much he disgusts me, I shall never give myself to another man. I couldn't possibly abandon my principles of right and wrong. But in an ironical twist, she does, little by little. And that's the danger of going just a little farther each time, because before you realize it, you went all the way. And when looking back, you will be surprised at how far you came. Generally in life, this subtle but progressive movement is a double-edged sword, and it is great when you are going after the things you actually want. But it also might make you do things that consciously you would never want to do. To be fair, the wife was faithful for over 2 decades, but perhaps it was because she lacked opportunity, and further needed time to accumulate her matrimonial frustrations to the tipping point. She uses alcohol to elevate her sexual dissatisfaction and general unhappiness and drinks in excess to the point of losing consciousness. And that's when the husband takes advantage of the situation and does his deeds to her. Because of the state she is in, she is confused and not sure with whom she is having sex, the husband or the daughter's boyfriend. The doubt is created by the experience being more pleasurable than anything she previously had with her husband. The drinking also lets her tolerate the husband's somewhat bizarre sexual needs and gives her the courage and something to blame on her own indiscretions with the daughter's boyfriend. But the excessive consumption of alcohol is affecting her health, and to remedy it, she is told to stop drinking, doing the thing she seems to enjoy the most, since it was the alcohol that elevated her unhappiness. Basically, she is told to go back to her old, bitter, and depressed self. I think of the four, she is the most fascinating and tragic character, driven by suppressed feelings, including the need for revenge for her husband's defects and society's rules that brought her to this sad point in her life. She seems to want her husband out of the way, perhaps unconsciously, by doing things she knows are not good for his health, and she is enjoying this implied power over him and his life. Maybe it is a balancing act for being forced by the society and the husband to be a submissive and obedient wife. Then there is Toshiko, the daughter, who is an innocent victim of her parents' perverse games, and because of it she harbors a certain amount of dislike for both of them, and even hate for the mother, partly caused by the resentment for not inheriting her good looks, and also for seducing her boyfriend. The daughter is more complex than the mother and plays her own psychological game. She decides to move out of the house, probably to get some distance between herself and her parents, and also to limit the contact between her mother and her boyfriend. But it is too late, since he is already an active participant in her parents' sexual festivities. So to get even, she instigates her father by disclosing to him bits about her mother's and boyfriend's encounters and insinuates what they might be doing when together. It is rather obvious that Mr. Kimura, the boyfriend of the daughter and the lover of the mother, prefers the latter role. His motives seem to be rather simple, carnal satisfaction. He's a bit of a third wheel, just a tool for the wife and husband to help resolve each one's frustrations, but he seems to enjoy being used and even brings his own ideas to spice up the ménage à trois. To make the couple's frolic adventures more intense, he introduces the husband to the Polaroid camera and its possibilities, and the husband realizes the boyfriend, his presence is somewhat essential to his own sexual performance, and tolerates or even indirectly encourages his wife's matrimonial infractions, even though he is in denial of it to himself. I realize that Kimura is becoming indispensable to our sexual life. However, I do like to warn her, though I need scarcely say it, that she mustn't go too far with him. Not that there shouldn't be an element of danger. The more the better. In fact, I want her to make me insanely jealous. It's all right if she makes me suspicious that she has gone too far. I want her to do that. To sum it up, The Key is a great example of Japanese modernist literature. The plot is a complex web of human interactions caused by matrimonial crisis, and the novel is sexually brutal and blunt, told in a direct manner without any Western morality obstructing its message. but at the same time, it is artistically delicate and feminine, and it includes some subtle and sensual descriptions. I sat down for a moment and watched him there in the gloom, but he seemed strangely quiet, so quiet that I uncovered the lamp and let the bare light strike his face. Then I saw that his eyes were half opened, fixed in a rigid, slantwise stare. I found very interesting the way the characters dealt with the situations they found themselves in, and even more so how they dealt with each other. It was cold, calculated, and very cerebral, but it also was motivated by passion and other emotions, such as the woman's need for revenge. The novel reflects Tanizaki's more mature post-war period, and it sits up there with the Diary of the Mad Old Man. And as I mentioned before, it might be difficult for the younger readers to connect with the theme of the book, since it does require a bit of personal references to enjoy the plot. There is a 1959 Japanese adaptation of The Key, titled in English Ad Obsession, and it is very good, which is true for the most of Japanese adaptations of their literary works. But the film takes a bit of creative liberty with the ending. Also, there is the 1980s Italian adaptation, which is not bad, except it focuses a bit too much on graphic sexuality. But being Italian, it can be forgiven. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback which I transformed into a hardcover, leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A, naturally tan hide. I buy from a tannery in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First, I designed the cover, which what I did here is I used this old Japanese woodblock print, where this middle-aged man is somewhat forcing himself on the top of the woman with some obvious sexual aim, and interrupting of what might be considered her journal. And I thought the portrait situation nicely related to the theme of the book. I also added the title in Japanese as well as in English. This is the back with the blurb and Shinto shrine gate, which I usually add to the Japanese novels, probably to give them a bit more of an exotic feel. And inside the front cover, I printed a quote from the book. If you want to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather-bound hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend $100, but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel, and for every 100 donations, I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So if you are cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much, so thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So if you want one, don't snooze or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here. And until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.